What's going on, y'all? It's your boy PM. Now, today I'm going to be making a video talking about how I found Christ through my trials and tribulations, the events leading up to it, and where I'm at in current time. So if this sounds like something that you're interested in, sit tight. It's going to be a long one, but here we go. Now, a couple of things I got to include is the context in order for us to understand where I was in my point in time in life. So I got to start off at childhood. Growing up, I've always had this existential questions that always lingered on my mind. Questions like, who are we? What are we? Have we always existed? Were we created? And if so, who created us? Having those questions in my head always left me with uncertainty and anxiety. And growing up, I had a lot of panic attacks because of it, because of that uncertainty. Growing up, on my mom's side of the family, they were primarily Christians, and on my dad's side of the family, they were primarily Catholics. I didn't understand what the difference was at the time, but I knew that there was a difference. So asking adults like, oh, well, what if there's Catholics and Christians? I assume that there's more than just that, and if so, if it's all the same, then why are we teaching different subjects? I mean, if it wasn't different, wouldn't it be called the same thing? And if so, then who's right and who's wrong? And it was a lot of questions that I never really got a definitive answer for. And even the uncertainty, well, what does that leave me, and what does that make me? And still with a lot of uncertainty, left a lot of unanswered questions, and even more questions that got left unanswered. So those had lingered into my mind for the longest time. But at a young age, I knew what morale was, and just being able to, or having the concept of being a young adult at such a young age, being wise, if you will. So, fast forward, my mom would leave my brother and I at home sometimes on the weekends when she had to work. So, on the weekends, my brother and I we were responsible enough, obviously, to be left at home alone. And to keep busy, we would turn on the TV or play video games. And in one particular instance, I remember we turned on the TV to see how it feels to be like adults, and we wanted to watch the news for whatever reason. So we turn on the TV, and I'm gonna be beating around the bush with these some of these details because I want to leave out the details for privacy reasons, and it all makes sense. But when we were watching the news, and I can remember this vividly, this certain news anchor was reporting these certain group individuals, church group individuals, who were protesting at these two men who they were having a wedding, and some of the picket signs that they had made were very vulgar, harsh language like God hates fags, and you two are going to burn in hell for homosexuality. And at the time, I knew what homosexuality was. I couldn't have been more than 10 years old. And I also understood that I had family who were homosexuals. And I was like, well, I love them and I don't know them. So who am I going to believe? And as a kid, you kind of take what adults say at face value. You don't really question what they say, especially on the news. You would think what they're preaching is credible. 1, 2, you wouldn't think they'd be lying or spreading like hate for whatever reason. So it left me even more confused, but it was always on the back burner of my mind. I was okay. Weird. The following week, my mom was at work, my brother and I were at home. We turned on the TV and we're like, hey, let's see what the news has to offer this time around. And sure enough, the news anchor, same one, was like, so and so church is back at it again. Huh. Okay, we turn up the volume and we're watching attentively, and this kind of was a turning point, the start of my rebellion. And I can remember this vividly as well, because it was about this father and his son. His son was killed in the Middle East, and this was shortly after the 2001, the 9/11 attacks. And so they were able to recover his son's body, and they shipped it back to the US. So the father was trying to bury his son, and those same church group goers who claimed to be like the ambassadors of Christ, they were holding up picket signs with the same vulgar language, saying like, oh, your son is going to burn in hell for murder. And the distraught look on that father's face, he was just like, I'm just trying to bury my son, and I can't even have that solace or that peace today. And so that was a turning point in my life, for sure. I remember looking at my brother, looking at the TV, looking back at my brother, pointing at the TV, and I was like, if this is what God represents, then I don't want anything to do with God. And from that point on, started a rebellion. I started getting heavier into adult content. I started smoking weed. I started to get into fights at school, getting suspended from school, almost being expelled. Grades started to slip. I remember stealing from stores, eventually getting caught from it. And none of it I was really proud of. But I did it because I didn't care what happened to me spiritually. I was like, I don't want anything to do with that part. But I cared enough to know what would happen to me physically. So I was smart enough to do things without getting caught for the most part. And it was like that for a long time. I would even say up until my adult life. And it was like that. I mean, I started making music when I got a little bit older. That didn't necessarily glorify the kingdom of God. Started doing stuff that probably wasn't all the best, but again, leaving out some details, So fast forwarding, I remember my mom moved out of state, and at this point in time, I'm living in the city of Las Vegas. So my mom hits me up saying like, hey, I know you're busy working. Do you have time? We're going to be out on such and such dates. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to, meet up. So we ended up meeting up. I believe we went to the Flamingo Pool, and they had a DJ going, whatever. So we're having cocktails, we're swimming, just chopping it up, talking about life. And she had asked some leading questions that alluded to a question that she really wanted to ask. Because she saw, she heard the music that I was making. She kind of knew the route that I was on, or the direction that I was heading in. So she had asked me a question that I would never forget. And she was like, so, do you even believe in God? And I hadn't even thought about it up until that point, and up until about really that last time when I had watched the news with my brother when I was 10, and I had to have been 24 maybe at this point. And so I kind of gave her this wild response, no, I don't believe in God, and I believe more so in man. I believe in science, somewhere along those lines. But it was a 5 to 10 minute response of just yapping, of me saying basically no. And the look on my mom's face that with her, when she heard my response, she kind of responded with this kind of upset, almost as if you heard some very bad news, and you don't know how to properly intake that information. And I mean, at that point in time, I really didn't care, I just really didn't. And that day it was hot, but after I had given my mom that response, it was almost as if someone had turned the heat up. almost like I was in an oven, and just like it definitely got hotter. I remember looking up in the sky and the sun was so bright in my eyes. I was like, oh man, who turned the heat up? I need more drinks, at that point. But that was the starting point for my trials and tribulations. Shortly after that, I had a car that was paid for. It was a 1996 Chevy Cavalier. It started having a theft detergent problem. So basically, whenever my car felt like it was being stolen, it just wouldn't start. And it caused me to miss a lot of work, or at least being late to work. I couldn't do things when I needed to do things, and it caused some problems, and nothing mechanically wrong, just electrically. So I ended up spending, dumping thousands of dollars trying to get that fixed. I eventually took it into a Chevy dealership. They said that, oh yeah, it was this wire, and then it eventually had the same problem again. So I couldn't really get that problem fixed. So I just ended up dumping money into something that I only knew that was like my only source of transportation, basically. So I had really no other choice. With that being said, I remember my brother and we ended up going to meet up with my dad for Thanksgiving in Arizona, because they have like a resort, or they had a resort there or something like that. So we met up for Thanksgiving. When I came back from that Thanksgiving break, I remember my vehicle wasn't there. It was parked in the spot and it wasn't there. And so the people that I was living with, they're like, oh yeah, they got towed. I was like, what? It got towed, but it's not like I could have moved it without like hooking it up and dragging it somewhere. And I was like, why did it get towed? It was like, oh, well, your car wasn't the only one that got towed. They were pressure washing the streets, and they were also pressure washing those spots, and your car was in the way, so it got towed. So I ended up calling the 311 or 411, whatever it was, to figure out where my car was at. So I called up the tow yard that had it, and they told me, yeah, if you want to get it back, it's going to cost $400 for us to release it. And the first day, I told them, well, I don't have $400, and I don't even think the vehicle will start. I wouldn't be able to drive it off the lot. Like, well, we can tow the vehicle to the street for you. And I was like, okay, well, how much would that cost? That's going to be an extra $50. And I was like, so it's going to cost me $450 right now to get a car that possibly won't even start. And I was like, you guys can't tow it back to where you got it? And they're like, no. So each day that I was in the pound, it was going to be an extra $50. So ultimately, I ended up just letting that vehicle go. And it sucked. But I was purchasing a motorcycle with the horrible credit that I had at the time, and it was $640, I believe, when I had financed this. It was a 2016 or 2017 Honda Shadow Phantom, I believe it was. And so I really didn't care too much for that car, but it sucked because it was paid for. Shortly after that, I would say like a month or two later, it was actually in the month of December, or no, yeah, it was a month later. In the month of December, my grandfather ended up getting sick. So I spent the holidays there helping my grandfather out with his medical, and during the time when he was in the hospital, right before he was going to get dispatched, they kind of gave us the news, like, your grandpa is his condition is not well. He pretty much only has 15% left of his heart, and he needs a quadruple bypass surgery to prolong his life. But with his heart being so weak, he will not survive the operation. It wasn't like a 1 in a million or 1 in a billion that he would survive. It was, he would not survive the operation. So really our only option was for him to be placed on hospice until his time has come. And so that point, it was like a 3-month or less for a clock placed upon his head, basically. So that really didn't put anybody's mood in all the greatest, and that kind of weighed on everybody's mind, not just mine. So I remember 2 months after that, my grandfather had a truck that they took a loan out, and they used the truck as a lien for the loan, but they were going to sell the truck to pay for my grandfather's medical expenses and help them with rent and whatnot. So I remember having to fight tooth and nail for that truck. Eventually I ended up getting it in my possession, so that was a blessing for sure. I would say a month after that, maybe a month or two, can't remember the timeline, but I remember driving to work, riding to work on my motorcycle, and I used to work at Topgolf, Las Vegas. So they have a tiny parking lot, so the employees weren't allowed to park in that parking lot. So we were forced to resort to parking at the MGM parking garage. So I remember getting off my bike once when I parked, and I pulling out my phone, walking to Topgolf, going on social media, and then I saw a lot of friends kind of posting like, oh, well, say it ain't so, he was taken way before his time. And I was like, I wonder who they're referring to. And sure enough, I just did a little bit of digging and found out that one of my good friends or best friends at the time was killed in a motorcycle accident. And me just having just purchased a motorcycle, it was hard because for whatever reason I thought I was next. I wasn't trying to play in the victim game or anything, but I just didn't want to be the next one dead. And I saw how fragile life can be, and no one is safe, from death. And I remember posting something along the lines of like, I'm gonna sell this death machine, I don't want to be next, rest in peace, you'll always be missed. When I had posted that post, there was a Spanish news journalist who had reached out to me saying like, hey, I'm sorry to hear about your loss. Seems like you knew so-and-so. I would like to do a story about this. And I was absolutely. My 3 conditions were, well, 1, I just didn't want it to make it seem like it was about myself. I didn't want to put my face on there to, to claim fame or whatever it was. 2, the story has to promote motorcycle safety there in the Las Vegas Valley. And then 3, somewhere in the news, leave a link or something to his GoFundMe page, and that was tough. Around that same time, I remember I didn't have their family added on like social media, or I didn't have any contact, so I didn't know anything about the funeral. But I knew somebody who knew about it, or who could find out about it. So I remember calling that person up, and I was like, hey bud, can you do me a favor? I'm not trying to reach out to, which would be his ex or his current girlfriend at that time. I don't want to reach out to her. I know she probably has a lot on her plate right now. Can you just let me know whenever that funeral is? Because I do want to go, but I don't want to reach out to her and bother her or the family or anything like that. And he was like, yeah, sure thing, bud, I got you. 5 days go by, 6 days go by, 7, and I believe it was 8 days that had went by up until that point. And I remember like thinking to myself, the body has to be decomposing by now. I haven't heard anything from so-and-so. I want to reach out to him. So I called him that morning around 9 o'clock. Never got back to me until like 10:44 that night. So I remember answering the phone, And he was like, "Hey, David, I missed your call, buddy. What's up?" Almost like the demeanor in his voice almost sounded as if like he was confused on why I was calling. And I was like, "Hey, man, yeah, just trying to figure out if you heard anything about, so and so's funeral. Any updates?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was today." And I was like baffled because I had that day off that day, so I definitely could have made it. But regardless, even if I had worked that time, I still would have missed work to go see my, good best friend's, funeral. And so I was like, "Dude, are you kidding me? You kidding me? I thought you were gonna keep me in the loop and you didn't. Like, are you serious?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, bud. For whatever reason, I thought you knew." And I wanted to just blow up on him. And I was like, "Okay, can you at least tell me where the ceremony was held? I will at least like to go to his gravestone and pay my respects." He told me where it was, and I just hung up on him. I was so mad. The next morning, I picked up my cousin in my grandfather's truck, and we went over to the funeral site, or where he was supposed to be buried. Ran up to the receptionist counter. I was like, "Hey, there was a person who was buried here yesterday. I just need to know where he's at, or what part of the cemetery he's at, so that way I can pay my respects." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure the family decided to cremate his body." And I was like, "Well, hold on. What?" No, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but let me double check for you." She came back, she was like, "Yeah, they had the ceremony here, and then they took his body to get cremated after." And I was like, "Okay." And I remember getting back into the truck with my cousin, and like the air just felt really heavy. And I remember I was like, "Hey, you want to go grab something to eat?" He was like, "Yeah." So we go around the corner to Sunset and like Warm Springs, and we ate at the Egg, and I couldn't even really eat. I was like playing with my food at that point. And I held on to that for the longest time. I beat myself up over it. Only if I was just more attentive or should have been more involved, and I would have been able to have said goodbye, at least, or something, paid my respects in some way, shape, or form. But it took me a while to grow from that adversity for sure. Shortly after that, I thought things were starting to look for, better for myself. I ended up getting a girlfriend, and started spending my time with her. And when I had gotten with her, she had told me that she was going to be moving out of state eventually to better advance her career. And I was like, "Oh, I love that idea. I might even do the same thing as well." Not even like a month of us dating, the family that I was living with currently, I was paying rent, and I contribute to the house, I clean, whatever, and never really became a nuisance in any way, shape, or form. But for some reason, I can't explain it, it just almost felt as if like they were jealous of me being out of the house or spending time with another group or an individual rather than with them. So one night when I came home, they just kind of laid it down on me. They're like, "Hey, we noticed like kind of changed." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "Well, you used to come and watch TV with us and hang out, yada yada yada. Now you're just kind of like a passerby. We just see you once in a while." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like, I don't mean anything by it. Like, I just kind of just doing my own thing out here." And it blew up into out of proportion, to say the least. And ultimately, I ended up getting kicked out of that house. And I was like, "All right, bet. I'll find my way, whatever. I'll come back for my stuff." And eventually I ended up getting all my stuff. But for like about a week, I was just kind of couch surfing and sleeping on someone's floor, or even inside my grandfather's truck, whatever. And that girlfriend that I had just met, she had offered for me to live with her, but she wanted to verify it with her parents before me moving in. I was like, "No, I can't do that to somebody who I just met. That's just weird. Like, I would maybe like later down the road, but not right now. She was like, well, I don't like to hear you sleeping on the floor, so I'm still gonna ask. And I was like, all right, I guess I haven't really no say in this. She calls me up like an hour later saying, yeah, it's cool, you can move in with us. And it's like the first impression of meeting her parents, it was like, oh hey, like I'm your daughter's boyfriend and I'm moving in with you guys. It was just a weird, I don't know, image. I was weirded out, but we eventually, like, I mean, I got to love her parents more so than I did with her. It was crazy because even the father had offered me to stay and live with them while she moved out of state, and I was like, you know, I'd love that offer, but I think I'm gonna move out too. I'm gonna go back, you know, live with my parents and out of state and try to further my career as well. So that's what ended up happening. I packed up my stuff and we both pretty much moved at the same time. She moved to Texas, I moved to Colorado. And so that point of time, I remember I was like, I don't know what I want to do, but I need to do something that's gonna, you know, pay the bills. And I was like, oh, you know what? I think being a cybersecurity analyst would be that for me, and I could see myself doing something like that. So I remember enrolling into the Denver University, and I thought everything was gonna go good. And being in a long distance relationship, it can either go one or two ways. Either it'll make your relationship stronger, or it'll completely break it. And unfortunately, it was option B for us. We had so many problems, and it was just like minor problems. But minor problems usually trickle into bigger problems, and we never really talked about it. We just kind of get into a fight, and then it'd be swept underneath the rug. So there was a lot of things that were left unsaid that we just never really were able to talk about or filter out. So it just kept piling and piling up, and eventually that relationship ended horribly. And I remember before it ended, I mean, I was starting to get depressed, you know, just everything kind of weighing on my mind, from getting a car that was repossessed, to losing a best friend, to hearing that my grandfather was sick, to being kicked out of a house, to my, you know, having no money in the bank. And at that point my credit score was dropping rapidly, and now I'm having fights with my girlfriend, who I thought was going to be the love of my life. So the week prior, before our breakup, she was supposed to fly out to come see me, and at that point I was hoping that that could reconciliate whatever in our relationship that was dying. Like, okay, well, maybe just we've spent too much time apart. Maybe we can just, hopefully this will just kind of fill those holes or whatever. So I remember her buying a plane ticket. She took a picture of it and she sent it to me, sent the picture of the itinerary. And but leading up until that day, we would fight and argue, and she would ignore me, and I was trying to reach out and nothing. So having all that weight on my mind, and going to school in Denver and working in Colorado Springs, and it was just, I mean, I was just going into depression. I mean, I fell hard into depression. I mean, I couldn't even eat. I was at 160 pounds at that time, and I ended up dropping down to 140 pounds. So I lost 25 pounds in 5 weeks. But I remember that last day, or that day when we broke up, I was restless. I remember just hitting her up, called her first thing in the morning, she didn't answer. Called her again, she didn't answer, or sent it straight to voicemail. I was like, hey, if you care about this relationship or wanting to salvage any sort of relationship with me, you'd have the decency to at least pick up your phone. So I waited a minute and she answered. And so I was like, hey, what are you up to? She was like, nothing. And I was like, kind of sounds like there's a lot of noise in the background. Are you at the airport? She was like, yeah, I'm at the airport. I was like, oh, okay. Kind of brought hope to me. I was like, okay, well, maybe she's flying out here, And I was like, oh, but something compelled me to ask. I was like, so where you headed? She was like, to California. And at that point, I was just like, all right, you're gonna hop on a plane to California and not tell me? She was like, I was gonna tell you when I landed, but I didn't want to deal with it now. I was like, deal with it? Okay. I was trying to get a hold of you these past 3 days, and so that way we could, but I see where this relationship is at, and it's no longer one, basically. And so I mean, we broke it off mutually, whatever. I remember driving to Denver, just sad and couldn't focus. I couldn't eat. I couldn't anything. I mean, anxiety through the roof. And I remember I was sitting in class and the instructor was going over some material, and he was like, hey, oh, by the way, for those of you who took a loan out for this course, today's your last day. If you don't drop out today, whether if you pass or not, we still keep your money. Right, it was almost as if he was speaking to me. So I was like, I got up, went over to his desk, and I was like, hey, I gotta drop out, man. I'm not in the best headspace. Hell, he was like, hey, you know what, man, I get it. I ended up just leaving right then and there, and hopped in my mom's whip because she let me borrow the car at the time, and I was starting to drive back to Colorado Springs, and I was just dying. I mean, I was dying on the inside, but I was like pouring my tears out, and felt like no one cared, or no one, And I remember just taking off my seatbelt, and I remember closing my eyes going down highway, I-70 or whatever, and I was like, you know what, whatever happens, happens, I don't care. And it was almost as if like I felt something grip the steering wheel. And I remember hearing a loud voice saying, not yet. It was like an echo, but it was a loud voice, not yet. And I was like, what the heck? What the heck is that? And I was confused at the time, but something was telling me as well to, go back to Las Vegas. So I didn't know how I was going to do it. I remember calling up some people who were living there, and they said, yeah, you can live with us. And I was so grateful at that time. And then I just remember I didn't have any money to go back. I didn't have, more than $1 to my name. Actually, I was in negative money. I owed money. It was weird. So I didn't know I was going to go back, but the first thing that popped into my head was I had a gun. It was a 40 caliber Glock 22. And with some accessories with it. So I ended up calling a pawn shop in Colorado Springs, and I called them up asking them, hey, do you guys buy guns? It was like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, bet, I'll be there before you guys close. So I raced there, and I put all the accessories and the gun on the counter. I was like, hey, to be honest with you, I need enough money for me to get back to the city of Las Vegas. And they're like, for all this, the most we can give you is $250. And I was like, bet, I'll take it. Got the money. I went, quit my job, and went back home. My brother gave me $50, shout out to him. And I used that $300, and it got me enough gas to get me from point A to point B, and it was rough. It was rough because when I was working at Top Golf in Las Vegas, I had quit with the mentality like, oh, I'm not gonna come back. But I didn't leave on bad terms, obviously. But I said my goodbyes and whatever, had a party, and goodbye party, only for me to come back 5 weeks later. I remember having to call my boss and just cry and beg for my old job back, and he gave it back to me. I don't think it was out of sympathy. I think it was out of love for sure. And shout out to him too as well. But the people, they had a lot to say about me, and I felt it. And then I remember it was even confirmed too, because I had sought out a psychic tarot card reader, and she even told me, like, yeah, man, you're going through some stuff right now, and people at your work, man, they're laughing at you, they're scoffing at you, they're actually preying on your downfall, saying like, oh, this dude, what is he doing back, whatever. And I was like, yeah, I kind of figured as much, which didn't help my mood at the time. It just confirmed my suspicions. But they couldn't give me my full schedule back, and it was only 3 days, and one day was really a moneymaker day, so I had to rely on one day to a week to make insurance, gas, food, and then gym membership, and then the truck payment. I remember I was in debt so much that I could no longer afford to pay for my motorcycle, so I had to do a voluntary repossession on my motorcycle, and it still hurt my credit, but mainly so I made all my other payments lapse, and my credit score went from 640 to 460. That's the only way I remembered it, because the numbers were flipped, and it was tough. It was tough. I didn't care so much about the motorcycle itself, but yeah, it was just a constant reminder of how much of a mess up I was at that time. And so this is like late September, early October. I'm resettling back into Las Vegas, and I remember my mom calling me that night, and she was like, or that day, she was like, hey, I just got off the phone with your grandma. It could be any time now, and leading up to that point, I was like, Mom, you know what, like, they've been saying grandpa's gonna be gone, first it was any month now, then any week now, any day now it could be any time. Like, he's a fighter. I have full faith that he's gonna pull through, and she was trying to stay optimistic, and so was I, but we kind of both knew the reality of it, but it was almost more like just comfort words. And that night, that same day, but that night, he ended up passing away, because my mom shot me a text saying, yeah, he was gone. And I felt like I had no more tears left inside my body. Just a little recap. I had a car that was paid for, that was repossessed by HOA. That wasn't my fault. Never recovered it. From my grandfather being sick, that was weighing down on my mind, to losing a best friend who was killed on a motorcycle accident after purchasing a motorcycle or financing a motorcycle that I couldn't afford with bad credit, to being kicked out of the house that I was living in, to being with the girl who I thought was the love of my life, trying to further advance my career, to move to Colorado Springs, only having to move back to the city of Las Vegas within a 5-week time span, losing that person who I thought was the love of my life, and now losing my grandfather and having bad credit. So it was just like, it felt like a domino effect. Just one thing knocked over, and it just knocked everything else over. And I remember my cousin and my brother, they had hit me up, and we were on a 3-way chat for about an hour that night of my grandfather's passing. And I just remember talking about all the good times with grandpa and all that. And after the conversation, I just remember kneeling down on my bedside, and I remember praying. That was the best way I could know how to get God's attention or whatever. And I said, God, I know you're real. And I feel it. I really do. I don't know how to say this, but I'm hurting. But I don't care about myself. I really don't. I can die tonight. I really don't care about myself. But what I do care about right now is if my grandfather made it home safely. If you can give me some sort of sign to let me know that, that'll bring peace to me. That'll bring peace to my soul. And I was just listing off signs. I was like, yeah, shutter the lights or the blinds, flicker the lights on and off, or light this candle, blow it out, or slam the closet door, something, I would take it as a sign. And that night I eventually went to sleep. It was late 2 o'clock, and I only gotten maybe 30 minutes of sleep. But I remember this specifically, and this was the turning point of my life again, in the right direction, at least this time. But I remember laying on my left side, kind of like this, and I woke up, and within less than a second, I knew that there was something in that room with me. It wasn't demonic, and it wasn't of this world though, but I wasn't scared of it. And I remember saying, Grandpa? Almost just like that, in a questionable way. So I turned over and I flipped my body over, and now I'm looking kind of like directly up, and at the foot of my bed I can see almost like this reddish orangish mist hovering up along on the foot of my bed. And I just remember trying to make heads and tails of it. And as I sat there, it was getting closer and closer to me. And now it was right above my head. And so I just remember kind of staring at it. And then when I inhaled, it felt like I was gasping for air. It even sounded like there was a but the moment I exhaled, I felt nothingness of this world, at least. Might I remind you, up until that point, I was suicidal, I was anxiety driven, I was angry, I was depressed in every way, shape, or form. I felt betrayed. I just, all the negative emotions that one could feel, I felt at that time. But when I exhaled, I felt none of that. I wasn't angry, I wasn't depressed, I wasn't suicidal, I wasn't in pain. I didn't even feel happy. Happy in the sense how we as humans would interpret it. I felt happy, or I felt blissful, because I felt no human emotions. And I was in so much shock and awe, I didn't know what to do. So I just sat there upright, leaning against my bed, just like staring at my body like, what is going on here? I'm still trying to make heads or tails of it. And then also too, like this part of my area, my shoulder, breast, my breast area was like 10 to 15 degrees hotter than any other part of my body. And so I remember looking at my hands, trying to see if I was transparent. And I was like, no, I'm not transparent. I'm not a ghost. So I remember lifting up my shirt and putting my right hand over my heart, almost as if I was about to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I was like listening to my heartbeat, and I was like, doom doom, doom doom, doom doom, doom doom. It was very soft but loud at the same time. And I was like, no, I'm not dead. So I just went back to just doing that number, and I just enjoying it. I could have sat like that forever and I'd have been okay with it. But it only lasted like maybe 7, maybe 10 minutes, somewhere around there. I don't know. I was just lost. And after that feeling had wore off, it was almost as if like I was brought back into the physical world. I heard a rush, almost like going through a wind tunnel. Then I heard the AC. The AC was going in the background. The fan was on. My heart was beating at 120 beats a minute again, and I just remember all those emotions, all those negative emotions just came right back. And I was like, grabbed my phone. I was like, Grandpa. Started opened it up, turned the flashlight accessory on. I started scanning the room. I didn't see that reddish orange mist or any sign of it. Turned the flashlight off, and I was just like, what just happened? Maybe a week after that, I was praying to God, and he confirmed it with me. In a way, it was like his sign of saying, like, that was his sign of showing that your grandfather's okay. And I sent him to tuck you back into bed to let you know that he has made it home safely. And a month after that day, a month later to the day, I ended up getting baptized. And that was the best way I knew how to worship God. And I ended up getting this tattoo right here. I don't know if y'all can see that. Right here with the cross. And that was the day when I did get baptized. What was strange is because I was sitting in the crowd, listening to the pastor, still going through all these emotions, trying to, juggle everything. And I just remember, like, the pastor, he was standing up there, and for whatever reason, I started listening attentively, and he was like, hey, if you've been ever thinking about getting baptized and just haven't done it, why are you waiting? And I was just like, what? Is he talking to me? He's like, yeah, I'm talking to you, yeah. Why don't you come on up? Why wait? Are you waiting to get clean for the Lord? This is why you get clean. This is why we clean you. You don't have to be clean to get clean. That's what baptism, the baptism is for. I was like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, are you scared of, not having any clothes? We have plenty of clothes. We have spare clothes. We have shorts and t-shirts. Come on up. We have plenty of towels. No better time than now. Let's get baptized. Come on. And I was just like, I remember looking at my friend who was at church with me, and I was like, hey, do you mind waiting? He was like, no, I don't mind waiting. Like, go do your thing. And I remember getting baptized that day. I didn't really feel any different physically. I knew I felt like I was doing the right thing, or the best that I knew of my ability at that time. And but it did feel right to me. So that's kind of all that really mattered. My life, I was hoping that, like, once when I got baptized, that everything was going to get better. And did it? No. In a weird sense, it did, but it didn't. And I'll explain. Shortly after, I remember I started losing hours at my job, and I wasn't paying the bills. So I ended up getting a second job. A place that I was applying for 7 years, since I was 19 years old. So I had been 26 at that time. And going on 27. So I remember starting a job inside the Luxor Casino. And the reason why it took so long to get into it, because it was the Culinary Union 226. And they didn't hire males with long hair or tattoos. And so I hit them both. And that's how I landed that job. So finally I landed a job that I was trying to get for 7 years. And they were giving me 4 or 5 shifts a week with the potential to pick up more shifts. And so I was making like $16 an hour, and like on top of like $150, $200 a day in tips. And I was like, man, this is great. I can definitely, bounce back from this. And so I kind of just let my other job go over at Top Golf. So when they scheduled me on the same day, I ended up calling out if I couldn't get the shift covered or whatever. And so I just ended up going that route. Come January, they started giving me 1 day a week, and that was Top Golf. And so the one day that I finally went into work, they called me into the office. They're like, "Hey, we need to see you." And I was like, "Oh, I already know what that's about. Time to face the music." But they were really cool about it. They're like, "Hey, man, we understand your situation. We know that you've been going through some stuff, and it's probably the right place, but the wrong time. Once when you bounce back, come see us. We'd love to have you back." And I was like, "Hey, man, I appreciate that." And I mean, no one likes to hear the news that they got fired. You know what I mean? And but it was what it was. Well, as soon as that happened, I started losing hours at the job that I was at inside the Luxor, and I felt like I was just really back to square one. So I was like, well, I got God on my side, I don't care. So then I started applying for jobs again. Now this time I was already in the Culinary Union 226, so it should be easy enough for me to get another job, and sure enough it was. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I was like hooraying, by myself, giving myself a pat on the back, because I had just landed a job at the Wynn Casino, and I was going to be the bus boy for the pools. And I was like, man, I'm going to have two jobs, 2 Culinary Union 226 jobs. Like, man, I'm going to be making bank. Like, this is going to, my life's starting to turn around. And so I remember filling out all the paperwork, doing the drug tests and all that, and fingerprints. I remember even doing it was like a pre-orientation. So I think the orientation was just talking about the lifestyle of the Wynn Casino and all that, and whatever it was, but I was looking forward to it. This was around February, March, right? And as soon as I was playing the waiting game to start, COVID happened. I was like, oh no. They ended up shutting down the majority of places, that including the casinos. So, something I forgot to mention was that when I just got laid off over at Top Golf, I applied for unemployment because I didn't know how long it was going to take me to find another job. And I definitely admitted, I was missing work, whatever, I was calling out, and because of that, they denied me for unemployment benefits. I was like, okay, well, it was at least worth a try. But when I got laid off due to COVID, I tried reapplying for unemployment benefits, but they said that you already have an open case that is closed, so you weren't able to, or I wasn't able to apply for benefits at that time. So I tried appealing it, and they rejected it with the same response. So at that point in time, I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford any of my bills. And my mom hit me up that night, and she was like, we don't know how severe this so-called pandemic is, but we're not going to take any chances. You're more than welcome to move back in with us until you get your feet, get yourself back on your feet. You're more than welcome to live with us, and when you get back on your feet, you can move back to Vegas, or you can stay here. But we'd love to have you. And I was like, I think that's the best course of action. I'm going to leave, but I got to take care of a few things here before I end up going over there. And she was like, yeah, that's fine, take your time, whatever. So I remember, it was 2 days later, I was playing video games with my cousins, and there was a voice inside my head saying, go. And I was like, go? And I go. And I was like, knew what that was referring to, but I was like, okay, I won't go right now, because it was like midnight at the time or 1 o'clock or something. And I was like, but I will leave first thing in the morning. And I was restless that night. I didn't go to bed till like 2, but I woke up at 6 and I just grabbed all my stuff and I ended up leaving. And 13 hours later, I ended up making it into Colorado Springs again. And turns out that night, if I would have waited even 1 hour more, I would have probably got stuck in a blizzard, because it was clear. The roads were clear at least the whole way there. But the moment I had passed through, it just got bad. And my grandfather's truck is a rear-wheel drive truck, and that would have been a bad situation. So, shout out to God for having my back on that one. It was kind of embarrassing too, like having to move back to Colorado Springs, because you got to bite your pride, push your pride aside. And I ended up having to go back to a job that I worked at like 7 years ago prior to that, and I was working back at Walmart. And I was like, you know what, I'm just here temporary. I'm going to be dipping back to Vegas as soon as they give me the shout back. But the one job never called me back. But the Luxor did. They called me back, and they couldn't guarantee me a schedule. Heck, they couldn't even guarantee me one day. They just said you're going to be on call, and I was like, no. Because with any union job, or at least this one, they go by a list that they have, and seniority mainly on that list. So whoever had been there the longest, 30, 40 years, they were the first ones to be reached out to, and they got a full-time schedule, and then they just kind of went down the seniority list. But because I just started there, I was at like the bottom of the barrel. And I was like, I'm not going to dip back to Vegas for one day, maybe a week, for a couple of hours. That's bull crap. So I just ended up letting those jobs go, gave up on it, whatever. And I was like, I remember on my mom's birthday, I told her, yeah, I'm going to see how it's like here in Colorado Springs. So I decided to stay. In the moment I decided to stay, that's when I was more susceptible for dating. I didn't want to date, beforehand, because I didn't want to get, I didn't want to catch feelings with anybody and then not want to go back to Vegas, But no, that all changed. And then I met a woman who ended up being my girlfriend, who's now my wife. Amen to that. And when I thought things were starting to, finally start to turn around, my parents and I kind of had I wouldn't call it a falling out, but opinion of indifferences, if you will. So I ended up moving out and moving in with my girlfriend into an apartment, and it was expensive. We were paying $1,605 for base rent in a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, 847 square foot apartment in Colorado Springs. It was rough with bills and utilities and all that. I mean, everything else that came with it ended up being like almost $2,000 a month. And so I resorted to working 2 jobs, and my wife, she stuck with one. So I mean, there was 3 sources of income coming in the house, but even then we were still trying to pay off debt and pay bills while trying to live. So at that point, we weren't even living, we were just kind of surviving. And I remember just knowing that just having God on my back, I knew things were going to get better, but just the action of going through it sucked. I was like, I just want it to end. Just want to wake up and hopefully all of this ends, but it's not how God works. Fortunately, you don't pray for a lighter load. You pray for a stronger back. and but it was still hard. But I had to learn to do hard. So I remember another turning point in my life was my wife had called me while she was at work, and she was like, "Hey, are you off right now?" I was like, yeah, I'm off. What's up?" She was like, "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you." I was like, "No, don't be sorry. What's going on?" She was asking me if there was any food in the house. And I was like, yeah, let me check. And I was going through the list of what we had, and I was like, yeah, we got some potato chips, we got some hot pockets and some Kraft mac and cheese, all that. She was like, "Hey, I think you could warm me up like 2 hot pockets and some mac and cheese and bring it to me." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And that broke. I remember bringing it to her on her lunch break. Her eyes lit up with joy as I gave her, that food, and she didn't care what kind of food it was. She was just happy that, she was able to eat, And I remember, kissing her bye and telling her that I'll see her later. And I remember getting back into the car and driving back to the apartment and just breaking down in tears. Just throwing my hands and waving my fist around and punching the steering wheel, saying, "God, like, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? I'm working 2 jobs and I haven't had a day off." And I hadn't had a day off in 6 months. I was either working both jobs at once, or I was working the morning shift or a night shift. I never had a day off to myself. And I was like, what's wrong with me just wanting to provide for my family? What's wrong with me just wanting to, just do more for myself and for my wife? And instead of surviving, I want to be able to live. What's wrong? Like, I'm ready to work. I'm ready. Just whatever it is that you have in store for me, I'm ready. Please. I'm more than capable of doing it. And just crying, and while I was saying that prayer, if you will. And I remember in a way God was like, "All right, bet. Got you, fam." And, not even a week later, I remember I was on Indeed. And at that point in time, I was on Indeed like up to 5 times a day. Every time they posted a new job listing, I was like trying to figure out what it was. But my problem was, at that time I was stuck inside a box and I wanted to get out of it, but I kept thinking inside that box. So in order for me to get out of it, I had to start thinking outside of it. So I started looking for jobs outside of Colorado Springs that would pay money. And sure enough, they were having a job fair for the oil fields over at the World Arena in downtown Colorado Springs. So I was like, bet. I marked my calendar, so I was like, I'm ready. I must have made a very good first impression because I got the job like on the spot. I had my orientation date in October of 2022, I believe. Yeah. October 3rd, 2022. So I put in my 2 weeks notice at, my jobs that I was working at. And I just remember my promise that I made to God. I was like, thank you. But starting the oil field, I would say the first 6 months was hell on earth for me. It was, the best way I can put it was, imagine a foreigner going into a foreign land, speaking a foreign language, trying to learn a different language, trying to adapt to a new lifestyle and thrive. It was hard. It was like not knowing how to swim and being thrown into a deep end. It's either you're gonna sink or swim, bud. And I already had that mentality going into the oil fields. but it was hard. But every time, I mean, I would say every day for 6 months, I wanted to give up, for sure. There was no easy way. I'm not afraid to admit it. I wanted to give up every single day. Getting maybe, 3 or 4 hours of sleep each night, working 2 weeks at a time, 16-hour days on average. You'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, be at work at 3:30, wouldn't get back till 7:30, only having to do it all over again. Lack of sleep, slept deprived or whatever, not really eating as healthy, trying to learn and not get fired at that point. It was hard. It was hard. Trying to stay alive too, basically. Everything out there can kill you. The extreme cold. Man, there was days where I think the coldest I worked at was negative 58 degrees. I remember I looked like Ralphie from, little Ralphie from the Christmas Story. And I had so many damn layers on. But they gave me a chance, and God gave me a chance especially, and so I wasn't going to just throw that away. Because when things got rough, things got hard, I knew that I had to just do hard. There was no easy way around it. No matter how much I wanted it to be easy, I knew that if I started doing hard, everything else would eventually become easier. And that's what I started doing. And now it's been 2.5 years now since I've been with the oil field. And of course a lot of things have happened in between that, but nothing really to be, to take notice of. But did my life get any easier? No. Even being a Christian, I still get scoffed at to this day. Maybe that's why it took me so long to make this video, I don't know. But I don't care. I'm not here to please anybody else, not even myself. I'm just here to do my due diligence and show my thanks to the glory of the kingdom of heaven. And I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for God. If it wasn't for Jesus Christ, who saved me in my time of need. And through my trials and tribulations, I found God. And so, in conclusion, I want to thank everybody who has taken this time to watch this video. It's definitely something that was hard for me, and hopefully you enjoyed it. It's your boy PM, and I'll see you on the next one.